How do I future-proof myself, my people, and therefore my business? What do we want from our people? We don't want to have to micromanage them. If we give people a sense of purpose, that makes them motivated. Everybody's beliefs and values are the things that drive the behaviors. How do we connect number one with number three? That gap is your responsibility. Hello again. Today we're tackling the big leadership question. It's the one leadership question that we at My Daily Leadership aim to help all of our clients resolve. It's a big one. If you're in a leadership position, you've likely asked yourself this question repeatedly, probably, maybe even on a daily basis, most likely. It's a question that I think weighs heavily on all leaders. And it isn't, how do I manage conflict in my team? Not even close, although that is a good question. For another time, I suspect. Neither is it, how can I effectively manage my team? Nope, it's even bigger than that one. It isn't, how do I boost my team's productivity? Again, good question, but not for today. Today, we've got much bigger fish to fry. Today's question is, how do I future-proof myself, my people, and therefore my business? How do I future-proof myself, my people, and therefore my business? That's a big one. That's deep stuff. And for good measure, let's also tag on the question, how do I know when and how to manage and when and how to lead? Good question too. Now, these questions are exactly why we've put together this episode to help you figure out how to maximize your potential and the potential of your people and the potential of your business. And finally, how to stop managing and start leading. So welcome to Stop Managing, Start Leading, the podcast for leaders who need to stop managing and for managers who want to start leading. Well, I'm your host, Antonio Garrido, the founder and president of My Daily Leadership. I'm a serial entrepreneur, business founder, and leader just like you. I'm a 3-time author. I have led businesses from ground level startups all the way to Fortune 60s with billions in revenue and thousands of employees. And what if I told you that the secret to exceptional leadership is easier and closer than you think? Every leader and every manager has the potential to become exceptional, the kind of leader that they, their people, and their business deserve. And you, I promise, are no exception. You simply need to discover the mindsets, tools, competencies, and habits to unlock that potential. And that's where we come in. If you haven't already, please get to know our lovely friend, the subscribe button, and subscribe to My Daily Leadership, the YouTube channel, for actionable insights and practical tools in our podcast episodes every single week. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, don't forget to stop by and say hello to the follow button. Both will help you level up your leadership, so do it now. Story time. Years ago, more years than I care to divulge, a lot, I joined a company, and the size of my direct team jumped from around 15 people to about 140 at this new company. That was quite a jump. Now, to be clear, there weren't 140 direct reports to me. No, I had about 6, and they had people under them, and they had people under them, and so on and so forth. And by the way, quick aside, how many people do you have reporting directly to you right now? If it's more than, say, 6 or 7 maximum, and then only if you are a wonderful manager and leader, well, if you have more than that, then you need to figure out how to reduce that number. You're going to need more layers, unfortunately. But Antonio, I hear you cry, we need flatter, leaner, cleaner structures, don't we? Well, yes and no. Split your teams into groups of 6 or 7 at the max. Otherwise, what you'll do is you'll just manage. And that means you can't lead and you can't develop your people. There just aren't enough hours in the day. That's a topic for another video, I think. But Jeff Bezos, and I think we all know who he is, I think it was him that said, if you can't feed your team, your direct reports, your team with 2 pizzas or less, your team is too big. And he's 100% right. Anyway, my boss asked me how much time I planned to manage my team. And then how much time did I plan to coach my team? And then how much time did I plan to train my team? And so on and so on. Well, I don't know, I said. Let's just see what kind of people they are, shall we? And I thought that was a good answer. And he said, I don't think so. And he sounded like he meant it. He said, are you just going to manage them or are you going to lead them too? Well, lead them too, I said with a smile, thinking that's what he wanted. And then he asked, well, are you going to train them as well? And you're going to coach them or are you just going to manage them? Okay, so I figured out. He was asking me what my plan was, not just for caretaking my people, my team, but actually developing them, actually raising their capabilities and their standards and their skills. You're here, he said, you're here to make them and you better. And I'm here, he said, to make you and me better. Get the idea? So my boss makes me and him better. I make me and my people better, and they make themselves, their people better, and down it goes. Now then, if you typically join us on YouTube, you'll know that we always introduce you to a critical leadership model or two. How? Well, by drawing them out, because we're kind of visual leaders here at My Daily Leadership. We're VLs. Visual learners, visual leaders. If you're listening on a podcast platform, though, because maybe you're more of an auditory learner, that's what we call ALs, that's great too. But if you actually want to see the content that we're about to talk through actually drawn out in real time, you're going to have to switch over to YouTube. So do that now or do it later. Now, the models we draw in this episode and all episodes will also be available to download online at www.mydailyleadership.com/podcast. Okay, so let's waste no more time and let's jump right in. Okay, so to today's model. Now, for those that have joined us before, you'll know that we always start with a question. So what's today's question? Well, today's question is, how do I, that's you, of course, I guess this is hyphenated, future-proof myself, my people, and my business. Okay, so good question. We'll try and level that up. Because really that's what leaders have a responsibility for, right? They have to future-proof themselves, their people, and their business. Why? Because basically what got you here won't get you there, right? And the market's always changing and everything's always changing. And so if we stand still, we're going backwards. We constantly have to be looking forwards. All right, well, let's look at a couple of models to help answer this really important question. So let's start with this. We just have a table with 5 boxes on the left-hand side and 5 boxes on the right-hand side. So let's have a look. Let's start with thinking about, what do we want from our people? What do we want? Okay, so there are certain things that we want, and then there are certain things that they want. And when I say want, I mean, what do they want from, from their time at your organization, right? Your company. At work, what do we want? What do they want? Okay, well, we want certain things. Let's just run through what it is that we want from our people. Well, we want people who are self-sufficient. What does that mean? Well, that means people that just kind of get on and do the work that they're supposed to do, right? We want people who can just kind of just get on with it. We don't want to have to micromanage them and have them in closed hold. Certainly not the A or the B players, maybe C players. Conversation for another time. But we want people who are self-sufficient and kind of just get on with stuff. Okay, we want them to be self-sufficient, so that's fairly clear and self-evident. We also want them to have a high degree of skill so that they get on with stuff and they get on with stuff. And when they get on with stuff, they do good stuff, right? So we want them to have a high degree of skill. So we want people who are self-sufficient with a high degree of skill. We also want them to be well motivated so that they do lots of stuff. So we want people who are self-sufficient, who get on with stuff, with a high degree of skill, who do good stuff, and who are motivated so they do lots of stuff, lots of good stuff. Great. And we also want, especially for the good ones, right? We want them to stick around. We want some tenure. So that's what we want from our people. Self-sufficiency, skill, motivation, and tenure. Terrific. Well, let's take a second and have a look at the world through their eyes. What do our people want? Because if we know what we want and we know what our people want, then it can't be beyond the wit of man to make that happen. So let's have a look at what they want. I originally developed this model when I heard a terrific interview with the CEO of Netflix. They did a study, like a 360 full employee engagement study, all of their people, and they asked them, "What do you want? What do you want from work? What does your day look like? What does the culture look like?" And I'm going to share with you exactly what the people at Netflix, now for everybody, what they want, and then let's see how it ties in what I think that we want. Okay. So they said that they want a feeling of autonomy. In other words, they didn't want to be micromanaged. Well, let's have a look at that for 1 second. We want people who are self-sufficient and don't need to be micromanaged. They want a sense of autonomy and they don't want to be micromanaged. So we want the same thing. We're just looking at those two things from the other end of the telescope, right? We're both looking at the same things. They also want a sense of mastery. What does that mean? Well, that means that they can kind of get their arms around the job. They can spin all of their plates, right? And when they come home at night, they don't feel battered and bruised and entirely beaten up. They feel that they can, do the job and do the job well. They want a sense of pride in that. So they want feel a sense of mastery in their job. And we want people who are skillful. And again, that's the same thing through the different end of the telescope. They also want a sense of purpose. Well, if we give people a sense of purpose, that makes them motivated. I think you're figuring out where this table is going already, right? And they want some kind of progression. And we want tenure, we want them to stick around. Well, if you think about it, everything that we want is everything that they want. We all want the same thing. And if we all want the same thing, then we're going to be able to figure out how to do that. So how do I future-proof myself, my people, and business? Maybe we've started to answer that question just a little bit. So remember these things. Remember autonomy and self-sufficiency and that pairing, because we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Remember skill and mastery and that pairing. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Remember motivation and purpose. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. And remember tenure and progression. Let's just call that pairing 1, pairing 2, pairing 3, and the last one, pairing 4. Let's remember those pairings because we're going to come back to them in a few seconds. So let's just take a well-deserved break for a second. Well, actually, during this break, I want you to pick up your own pen and piece of paper and write down the following if you could, right? So whilst I take a break from writing and drawing, you can pick up your pen, piece of paper, and you can do some writing and drawing. Anyway, write down the following 3 words. Leadership, L-E-A-D-E-R, leadership. Health, check. Leadership, health check. That's leadership, health check. Put a little checkbox next to it. You're going to be putting a big check in that box shortly, right? Well, if you want to become an extraordinary leader, and I hope you do, and that's why you're here, it's really important to know where you're starting from, where the gaps are, how we're going to close those gaps, and how those gaps are limiting yourself, your people, and your business. Only then can you begin to intentionally close the gaps by developing your strengths and, more importantly, perhaps ameliorating your weakness. Now, leadership health check, it takes 5 minutes. So 5 minutes to have a look at our powerful leadership health check tool to discover how you're performing against the 5 core elements of exceptional leadership. So do that by heading to www.mydailyleadership.com or click the link in the description somewhere, and that's it. It'll take you 5 minutes. And 1 minute is all it would take to share your thoughts, questions, comments, and aha moments about this episode or any other episodes in the comments, and do that now, would you? Don't let 5 minutes hold you back from all the things that are holding you back. Okay, so now we have this well understood, what we want, what they want, self-sufficiency, skill, motivation, talent. Let's take these things and put them onto another model. So what we have here is we have a big square in the middle of the piece of paper, cut horizontally, right? And I'm going to start filling this model in. So again, follow along as you watch and listen. The whole thing, let's just call this the maximize potential model, because the question was, how do I future-proof myself, my people, and my business? Another way of asking that same question is, how do I maximize my potential, the potential of my people, and the potential of my business? Because when you maximize you, your people, and your business, then that is future-proofing your organization, skating to where the puck is going to be. Okay, well, let's start from the top left and go clockwise round to top right. First of all, if we're going to maximize the potential of one of your people, and I say one of your people, but I mean you too, obviously, right? It's got something to do with helping them with their beliefs and values. So everybody's beliefs and values are the things that drive the behaviors and lots of other things, but it all starts with beliefs and values. I think everything does. It's a conversation, but not for today. But where do these beliefs and where do these core values come from? Well, we're not born with them. We learn them over time. The beauty of that is we can change them if we have to. How do we do that? I'll show you in a minute. So if we're going to maximize the potential of our people, it's got to do something with their beliefs and values. But beliefs and values in and of themselves aren't actually going to change anything or do anything. So we actually need, down here bottom left, some actions and initiatives. In other words, we've got to do something. We can't just think our way to greatness, right? We actually have to do something. So that's actions and initiatives. Let's zoom along here, the bottom at the right. Think about, okay, well, when we do that stuff, we said earlier that we want them to be skillful, right? And a sense of mastery. That means it's also got to do something about not just taking actions and initiatives, but doing those actions and initiatives well. So we need some skills and abilities, right? If we could help upskill people and raise their abilities, then we're going to get closer to our maximum potential. And then top left, it's also got something to do with self-awareness and our favorite, emotional intelligence, EQ, because we have to recognize that there's a gap. So we need some self-awareness in order to do something about it. Okay, great. So we have to help our people in all 4 of these areas. We have to help them in terms of their beliefs and values, actions and initiatives. We have to help them in the skills and abilities. We have to help them in self-awareness and EQ. Well, how do we do that? Great. Glad you asked. How do we help people with beliefs and values? Well, there's only one tool for that. And the tool for that is coaching. In other words, we have to become pretty good at coaching. We're going to help somebody with their beliefs and values. Okay. Well, what about actions and initiatives? Well, we manage actions and initiatives, right? So we've got to be a good manager to help them with their actions and initiatives. Terrific. What about the skills and abilities? Well, we train those, do we not? So we have to train skills and abilities. And then we also, up here, mentor consequences. Okay? So we've got to be a good coach, we've got to be a good manager, we've got to be a good trainer, we've got to be a good mentor. And when we start to do all those things, we start to help our people, not just individuals, but groups of people. Okay, cool. Well, what do we coach? Well, we coach, let's call it the why. We coach the why. Why do we need to do it this way? Why do we need to do this? Why? So we coach the why. They need to believe it, because beliefs and values are entirely conceptual things. We have to help them with conceptual issues. Why? They need to understand. So we coach the why. We manage the what. What do we have to do? How many do we have to do of them, right? So we manage the what. That's behaviors. The what do we need to do in order to maximize our potential? And then we train the how. How do we do it? How do we do those things, right? That's how we train them, okay? And then what is it that we mentor? Well, we mentor consequences. The consequences. The consequences, right? In other words, as a consequence of this, this happened, and that, and this happens, and all of that kind of stuff. So, another way of looking at that then is, how do we know what to coach? Well, we look for patterns. So patterns point us towards things that need to be coached, okay? Events, we look at events to see what needs to be managed. We look at gaps to see what needs to be trained. And we look at outcomes to see what things that, the consequences that we're talking about. Okay, great. Now let's start. This is going to get a little bit busy. I recognize that, right? So, but in the book, we talk about this as well too, right? So now let me just figure out, how do we then overlay all of this stuff, the stuff that we want and the stuff that they want, back onto this other model? Okay, good. Glad you asked. So, purpose and motivation lives in terms of beliefs and values, right? So this is purpose stroke motivation. That was number 3 from our earlier pattern, from our earlier model. Down here is autonomy and self-sufficiency. And that was number 1. Here, in terms of the gaps, that's the mastery and the skill, obviously. Mastery and skill. Mastery and skill was number 2. And then the only one that's left, 1, 2, is number 4, obviously, and that is tenure and progression. Okay, tenure, progression. In other words, what I'm hoping you're starting to see is, actually, if I'm going to maximize the potential of my people, well, myself, my people, and my business, there's more to do than just managing. Which is why I said earlier, if you've got more than 6 or 7 people, all you're able to do is manage, but you've got other jobs to do too. You've got to manage them. You've got to coach them. You've got to train them. You've got to mentor them. You've got to develop them. And you can't do that if you've got 17 people reporting to you directly, because it's just impossible to do. There just aren't enough hours in the day. All right, let's keep building this model. And I know it's getting busier and busier and busier. But okay, let's just, for the sake of keeping it nice and simple to the extent that we possibly can, even though it's already super duper busy, how do we connect number 1 with number 3? How do we connect beliefs and values with actions and initiatives? Well, the thing that connects those two is accountability. So we need to hold them accountable to their actions and initiatives. How do we connect skills and abilities to actions and initiatives? In other words, making sure that they're doing the right things in the right density and all of that kind of stuff. Well, we do some kind of role plays with them. And that can just be conceptual, talking about situational conversations. That's okay too. And then how do we connect skills and abilities with self-awareness and EQ? That's by giving really, really good feedback. And the reality is their speed and development is going to be limited to your ability to give constructive, useful feedback. And then the piece that connects these two up here, which is 3 with 4, is guided discovery. And, on our program, we teach you how to do all of these things, of course. Guided discovery. Okay, splendid. Let's just do 2 more things, then we'll try and tie the whole thing together. Another way of looking at all of this, and I hope, listen, I know we've just raced past it at 1,000 miles an hour, right? But I hope you get the principle that there's a lot of things to do. We don't just do this actions and initiatives, manage our people. We've got many, many more things to do, especially if we want self-sufficiency, skill, motivation, tenure, and all of those good things. Another way to think about this model is if you split it, top half and the bottom half. This top half here is, we're going to call this, if you like, personal growth. And excuse the writing in that because I'm kind of half sideways. This is business growth. And obviously, in order for the people in the organization to grow their business, we obviously have to grow their skills and abilities too as individuals, right? Because individuals make up teams and teams make up organizations. Another way to think about it for you, so that you can be intentional about what it is that you're doing at any particular point in time. In terms of personal growth, I'd like you to think of that as lighting fires within people. So that's lighting fires within. That's the coaching and the self-awareness and the EQ. It's about guided discovery and accountability. That's lighting fires within. And then in terms of the business growth piece, that's lighting fires under. Lighting fires under people. So we should always, at any one particular point in time, think, am I lighting fires within people here? Am I lighting fires under people here? And both are entirely valuable, circumstantially for the right situations. Okay, cool. So what we now have, I'm hoping this is all going to start to make sense. We have a responsibility to maximize the potential of ourselves, get a coach, take an assessment, do all of that good stuff. Maximize the potential of ourselves. That's what leaders do. It's baked in. They have to maximize their own potential, maximize the potential of their people, and people are going to maximize the potential of the business. How do we maximize the potential of people? We've got to coach them, we've got to manage them, we've got to train them, we've got to mentor them, we've got to do all of those good stuff, the things that are on here. Why? Why do we have to do all of that? Because, let's go back to the first model, because we want self-sufficiency, skill, and motivated and tenured people, and they want autonomy, mastery, and purpose and progression. And if we can do that, the answer to the question, how do I future-proof myself, my people, and my business? The answer to the question is by ensuring, so that's the question. The answer is maximize potential. Because your job is to close the gap between where you are, where your people are, where your business is, and where you need them to be or where you want them to be. That gap is your responsibility. We have to close that. We're only going to close that through people. One last thing before we kind of wrap on today's video, and I hope this is worthwhile. If we look at this up here, which is this whole beliefs, values, coaching, all of that kind of stuff, all of the stuff up here, all of this stuff is what we're going to cover next time. So, if you want to know how do I do this stuff, how do I deal with beliefs and values and coaching and figuring out patterns and figuring out why and purpose and motivation, lighting fires within people, if that feels like something that you could do with getting a little bit better at, then tune in next time. Okay, well, I think that's all I wanted to say at this point for today. Other than, of course, I suppose, thank you once again for tuning in to Stop Managing and Start Leading, a My Daily Leadership podcast. Look, whatever the reason for you listening or watching today, I do hope that offered you something of value. I really do. even if it's just one tool or just one tip that maybe improves your own particular leadership ability by only 1%. Remember, there's immense power in marginal gains. Einstein said that compound interest was the 8th wonder of the world, right? Just get a little bit better every single day. There's also, guys, there's power in community. So please share your questions, share your insights, any topic suggestions you have in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. And whilst you're down there, give this video a like, give it a subscribe. And for our auditory learners, our ALs, you're only getting half the story, I'm afraid. Today was pretty graphics heavy. So I do recommend heading over to the YouTube channel where today's episode really comes to life with visual notes, models and drawings and all of that good stuff. Remember too, just before I go, all of our models are available to download at www.mydailyleadership.com/podcast. And in the next episode, we're going to introduce you to the one, the only model that you need to get really, 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 really great at coaching. Top left-hand corner, we just talked about it. And once you learn it, there's no going back in your leadership. Forever transformed. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Yes, really. I'm Antonio Guido with My Daily Leadership. Thanks for being here. Until next time, by wisdom and effort, ta-ta for now.